Rare birds of Sanibel. The birds of Sanibel tape presents the species that you are most likely to see on the island. This rare birds of Sanibel tape shows most of the other birds on the Sanibel checklist, so you can learn to recognize and identify the birds that are not seen so frequently. The first bird on the checklist is the common loon that you probably visualize on a northern lake where you can hear its eerie call. It has striking black and white markings in the summertime. Its legs are so far back on the body for efficient swimming that it can hardly walk on land. In the fall, it leaves the family life to spend the winter on the ocean off of the coasts and in the Gulf of Mexico. A few stop in at Sanibel and are seen in the bay or the saltwater lagoons in the refuge. The bird has dull colors in the winter, with grayish-brown on top and white below. It is a solitary bird that dives for food and may swim long distances underwater. The thick, straight bill distinguishes it from the red-breasted merganser and the immature double-crested cormorant. Horned grebes winter in salt water along the coast. A few are seen each year on the bay side of the island. We found this bird a few hundred yards offshore in Tarpon Bay. A few steps into the water to get a bit closer, ended up with a tripod in the water and the camera a few inches above the surface. But we took these pictures. The ear tufts and rufous neck are not apparent in winter, but the much smaller bill distinguishes it from the pied-billed grebe. It shows a white speculum in flight. The horned grebe can stay underwater for up to 3 minutes and swim as far as 500 feet. It will swim away from danger rather than fly. Northern gannets are pelagic birds that spend all of their time over the ocean, except when nesting in the far north. They dive from as high as 90 feet for fish in the ocean and have special airbags and head structure to survive the impact. The large white bird with a long, narrow wing with black tips is easy to identify. This picture shows an immature bird with black along the trailing edge of the wing. The birds may be regularly seen from land as they fly along the east coast of Florida. They fly further offshore along our coast and are only seen after a major storm drives them inland. Sanibel is on the northern edge of the range for magnificent frigate birds. During the summer, they can be seen flying high in the sky at midday and roosting on mangroves overnight. Their long, narrow wings with pointed tips and their light weight make them the most efficient soaring birds in the area. The double tail may be folded closed and appear single. The male frigate bird is all black, with a red pouch that can be inflated in breeding season. The female has some white on the front, and the immature has a white head. They do not land on water, but scoop food up from the surface. They often steal food from other flying birds. The frigate birds breed on the Caribbean islands and in the Marquesas. This picture shows Buster in front of its parents, the first frigate known to have been born on the dry Tortugas. They roost in this area on the Rookery Islands in Estero Bay. You can see the inflated red pouch of the male bird. The birds are helpless if they get down in the water, as they cannot take off. The narrow wings distinguish frigate birds from the turkey vulture, that is the only other black bird that soars nearly as well. The great white heron is a color variation, or morph, of the great blue heron. They are common at Flamingo in the Everglades National Park and on the Lower Keys. They can be distinguished from the great egret by their much larger size and their greenish-yellow legs. A few have been seen over the years on Sanibel. The Werdeman heron, shown here, is an intermediate form between the great blue and the white morph, and has a white head with blue body. The Werdeman is also found in the Keys, but has not been reported on Sanibel. They should not be confused with a breeding great blue that also has a white neck, but has black marks on the head. The American bittern may possibly be seen during the winter months in marshes like those in the Bailey Tract and parts of the Wildlife Refuge. They are the artists of camouflage and will point their bill up in the air and look just like a clump of marsh grass if they think they may be seen. They will freeze in position until you almost step on them before bolting. The bittern will eat any animal they can catch, including fish, mammals, and insects. Although they stay on the ground most of the time, they may perch high in the brush. While they sometimes fly, they will usually walk away into the marsh. Cattail reeds are the preferred habitat of the least bittern. They are common along the Sanibel River in the Bailey Tract of the refuge, or at the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Center, but you will seldom see the shy bird. They migrate north from Florida in the spring, but some stay in this area. Their nests are well hidden and are seldom found. The bird may flush and fly away as you walk along the edge of the reeds. If you look ahead, you may notice a lump halfway up the plant. The bittern will freeze in position when you approach, so that it blends into the reeds and is very hard to see. If you continue to watch, it will slide slowly down to the ground and disappear. Black-crowned night herons are occasionally seen perched on a low branch just over the water along fresh and saltwater areas on the interior of the island. They can be seen in the daytime, but forage for fish, insects, and crustaceans in the evening and at night. They often nest in rookeries with other species and feed on eggs and baby birds. The immature night heron is brownish-gray with white spots on the upper sides and white streaks below. When they fly, the head is folded back with only the toes extended beyond the tail. The glossy ibis is only occasionally seen on Sanibel at any time of the year, although it is a permanent resident of marshes and wet prairies throughout Florida. The body feathers change from a chestnut brown in spring and summer to a dark metallic green in winter. The head and upper body is metallic purple. When the light is in the right direction, the colors and gloss are striking. It feeds in fresh or saltwater marshes, on aquatic invertebrates, especially crayfish. It also eats insects and snakes. It flies with a rapid, duck-like stroke, with its neck and legs extended, but drooping slightly. The fulvous whistling duck was first seen in Florida in 1931 and is still an uncommon resident of marshes and flooded farm fields in the southern part of the state. The rounded shape that is more like a goose than a duck, and a tawny color with buff head and a darker back identify the bird. Small flocks are seen for a few days during many years, resting and feeding in the pond beyond the tower in the refuge. A few years ago, this group of snow geese spent a winter month on the Dunes golf course. This picture shows one blue-phase adult with an immature white-phase bird. Here you see another blue-phase adult with two immature blue-phase birds. It will be interesting to see if they return again. Mallard ducks are common elsewhere, but they are unusual on Sanibel. A few are observed in the pond beyond the tower in the refuge, and in the narrow waterways beyond the cross dike. The cinnamon teal is a rare bird that is generally found in the west, but a few stray to Florida in the winter and early spring and have been seen in the refuge. Their reddish color is very obvious. Gadwall ducks regularly winter in northern Florida, and some have been observed in Ding Darling in past years, before our recent drought and the shortage of freshwater feeding areas. They tip up to feed on aquatic plants, along with the other dabbling ducks. Redheads used to be seen in the pond by the tower in the Ding Darling Wildlife Refuge. They have not returned in recent years. The reduced numbers of many of the ducks may be due to the deterioration of the environment in their breeding grounds, as well as the local drought. Ringneck ducks have also been seen on Sanibel in past years. The continuing drought in recent years has caused intrusion of salt water into the freshwater ponds and a deterioration of the vegetation for many ducks. The ducks may return when rains refill the ponds with fresh water. The lesser scaup have also been affected by the poor quality of their freshwater vegetation. These lesser scaups were on the ponds in the Dunes Golf Course, rather than their usual place in the refuge. Buffleheads generally winter along the northern Gulf Coast, with a few as far south as Sanibel. They are diving ducks that feed on fish, crustaceans, insects, and seeds. At least one bird stays on the surface while the others dive. The hooded merganser is not on the Sanibel checklist, but 19 birds appeared in December, a few years ago, and occupied the ponds in the northwest corner of the dunes for about a month. They are regularly found in South Florida, and we hope to see them return again. The large white crest with a thin black border makes identification of the males easy. The females have a somewhat larger and fluffier head than the red-breasted merganser. The American swallow-tailed kite is one of the most beautiful birds in the area. It glides gracefully just over the treetops, wheeling around to find anoles and insects in the trees. At midday, it can be seen soaring high overhead. The bird flies over the refuge on many late spring and summer days, but it can be regularly found along the rivers and estuaries on the mainland, and in Corkscrew Swamp, where it nests. The nest is high in tall trees, and both parents attend to 2 to 4 eggs, the 28 days until they hatch, and feed the young insects and small invertebrates until they fledge in another 35 to 40 days. The adults eat their food on the wing. The white head and body with black wings and a tail shaped like a giant swallow make it unmistakable. The northern harrier is found on marshland and prairies throughout the state. The white spot on the rump is the most obvious identifier. They eat small vertebrates, especially small voles, and also some birds. This female has brown tones on the back. The male is gray. The harrier used to be called the marsh hawk, and they endlessly wheel and turn, flying back and forth just over the marshes, using their sensitive hearing to find food. When they detect their prey, they hover over it and drop down to grasp it in their talons. They can sometimes be found in the wintertime flying over the larger ponds in the refuge and other marshy areas on the island. The sharp-shinned hawk flies with a series of wing beats alternating with short glides. It has the rounded wing and long tail of the accipiters. They are found in woodlands in early winter and feed principally on small or medium-sized birds. They surprise their prey from hidden perches or catch them in a fast chase through the trees. The red-tailed hawk has been seen on Sanibel, but is more commonly found on dead trees or tall utility poles further inland. The red tail is best seen when the bird is flying.
Great egrets were mommy and daddies, and the snow egrets were the babies.
The merlin is a fast and graceful falcon that may be seen on Sanibel in the winter months. This picture was taken during summer in the north. It feeds on birds as small as sparrows, as fast as swifts, and as large as flickers. It hunts by maneuvering and speeding up to catch the prey in a series of shallow stoops, rather than by diving on it from great height. Peregrine falcons have been brought back from extinction on the East Coast and have been seen on Sanibel in the winter. They fly with a very flat and straight wing and make large sweeping turns and high-speed dives onto their prey. Here we see a merlin being harassed by a passing peregrine falcon. They can be distinguished by the curved wing of the merlin and the flat wing of the peregrine. The crested caracara has been observed on the golf courses of Sanibel, but it is basically a scavenger of Central Florida and can better be found along the roads in the Lake Placid area. It feeds on roadkills in the early morning. The caracara does not use thermals to soar high in the air as most other scavengers, but flies low over open scrub areas, much like the northern harrier. It nests in cabbage palm trees. The king rail is a bit larger than the clapper rail and has brighter colors. It lives in freshwater swamps or marshes rather than around salt water. Like the clapper rail, it runs away from danger and seldom flies. They feed on crustaceans and small animal life, but may also eat seeds and grain, especially in winter. This bird was feeding in a small wet spot to the left as you enter the Bailey Tract. The sora is the rail that you are most likely to discover on Sanibel. It is quite commonly seen in the wintertime along the edges of the Sanibel River. It migrates to the northern United States or Canada to breed during the summer. The sora can be identified by its short, thick bill and white triangular tail that flicks up repeatedly. It feeds on seeds, insects, snails, and other invertebrates. It comes out to feed, but will slip quietly back into the brush if it senses you are near. This picture was taken at the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Center at the bridge along the river near the tower. Go early before other people are around and approach quietly. They are very shy. The purple gallinule seldom visits Sanibel, but it brightens your day when you see one. It migrates to the West Indies and South America, but may spend the winter in Florida. The bird is easily distinguished from the moorhen by the white tail that flicks up like the sora's, the light blue shield above the beak, and the beautiful bright colors. It has very large yellow feet that allow it to walk on water lilies and other floating vegetation. Its nest with 6 to 8 eggs is built on floating vegetation in 4 to 10 foot deep water. It eats seeds, fruit, snails, insects, and frogs. These pictures were taken in the Bailey Tract along the river in the southwest corner. Other recent sightings have been made beyond the exit from Ding Darling and in back of the Rocks subdivision. The limpkin is not listed for Sanibel, but one of us saw the bird in a refuge at the end of the cross dike. The bird is nocturnal and can be heard calling in the evening and at night. It is most commonly seen in the early morning or in the evening on freshwater marshy areas throughout the state. The sandhill crane has been observed on the golf courses of Sanibel, but is not a regular visitor. The sandhill cranes of South and Central Florida are a resident population that are here year-round. The northern Florida population migrates each summer to the northern states. They feed regularly on the grass areas around the regional airport or on the open grasslands in the center of the state. They fly with their head and feet extended, as do all of the cranes. The snowy is a small plover with a light-colored back, some dark markings around the head, and white underneath. Look for it along the east end of our Gulf shore, at Johnston Shoals on Cayo Costa, or on the sandspit near the south end of Fort Myers Beach. Its numbers are dwindling as the beaches where they nest are disturbed. The females desert the young within 6 days, and a third of them re-nest with new males. The males tend the chicks for a month to 7 weeks, and then half of them re-nest with a new mate. Although the piping plover is an endangered bird, a few are mixed in with the other plovers in the area. They nest on open sand beaches, but development and crowds have displaced many nesting areas. A group of about 5 was on the spit on Fort Myers Beach for most of last winter. American oyster catchers are seen on Sanibel in the refuge or on the causeway. They are shy and will fly if approached too closely. Their bright orange bill is strong and used as a chisel to break into shells of the mollusks that they eat. They have nested on the Causeway Islands for a few years and raised young, as shown in this picture. They have recently nested on the Skimmer Island in the bay, and it is hoped that they will nest there away from the cars, people, dogs, and predators that have harassed them. The eggs are hatched in open sand, and the parents follow the young to protect them until they can fly. They feed the young for a long time while they are learning to open shells for themselves. Although the avocet is a western bird, a few of them stop at Sanibel each winter on the Causeway Islands. They have been even more common in Big Carlos Pass, south of Fort Myers Beach. They are a very dainty and interesting bird. In the spring, they molt to their breeding plumage and fly north to nest. The solitary sandpiper is a migrating bird that appears in the fall or early spring in the quieter recesses of the SCCF Nature Center, the Bailey Tract, or Ding Darling Refuge. It can be distinguished by the white eye-ring and by the bars on the edge of the tail feathers, under the tips of the wings. It is a solitary bird that bobs its tail with a different motion from that of the spotted sandpiper. Upland sandpipers are not listed for Sanibel, but one has been observed along the water's edge past the tower in Ding Darling. They migrate through South Florida in the spring and fall. The whimbrel can occasionally be found in the wintertime in the refuge. It can be regularly seen on the beaches south of Fort Myers Beach. Its long curved bill lets it feed on crustaceans, worms, and aquatic invertebrate deep in the sand. It has a shorter bill than the long-billed curlew and has pronounced stripes on the top of the head. The long-billed curlew has a very long, thin, curved bill with what looks like a small drip on the end. It is a larger bird than the willet on the right, and it does not have the pronounced head stripes of the whimbrel. It has a more cinnamon color than the brownish whimbrel or the lighter willet, especially under the wings. Curlews are not listed for Sanibel, but a few stay on the spit at Fort Myers Beach. I suspect that infrequent curlews may be misidentified as whimbrel. The marbled godwit is an unusual winter shorebird of Sanibel. It has a long and slightly upward curving two-toned bill that lets it probe deeper for food and clearly distinguishes it from the other shorebirds. This picture was taken at the dike in Ding Darling, where the marbled godwit in the center shows a redder color than the willets. This group of godwits is at the water's edge on Fort Myers Beach. Although the white-rumped sandpiper is not listed for Sanibel, this picture was taken a few years ago in Ding Darling, while the bird was migrating on its way from the southern tip of South America to the northern coast of the Arctic. It had stopped to eat for energy to continue its flight, and was so hungry that it hardly noticed the camera. Short legs, long wings extending beyond the tail, and a white rump when it flies are the determining field marks. In order to confirm the identification of the bird, we examined each of the individual frames of the bird when it flew to see the white rump, as shown in this view. The common snipe is with us in the winter at the north corner of the Ani Pond in the Bailey Tract. It is generally a solitary bird that likes a grass cover near the water, where it hunts by feel for insects, crustaceans, and mollusks. The bird will run on the ground in hiding if approached, and will take off explosively if it thinks it has been discovered. Snipes are also seen at the regional airport between the parking lot and the rental car lots. The Bonaparte's gull can be found in the winter in the ponds at Ding Darling Refuge and along the Gulf and Causeway shores. The black spot behind the eye is a good identifier in the winter when they are on Sanibel. In the summertime, it can be seen with a black head up north. It is a charming bird. The herring gull mixes in with a group of other gulls along the Causeway Islands or on the Gulf. The birds seen in this area are generally first or second year immature birds that are not yet of breeding age. They can be easily distinguished from the similar immature ring-billed gull by their much larger size. The mature herring gull is much lighter in color. The great black-backed gull has been occasionally observed in mixed flocks of skimmers, gulls, and terns along the Gulf shore. In this case, ring-billed gulls. The blackback and their much larger size make them easy to identify among the other birds. They eat insects, frogs, crustaceans, small mammals, and eggs and young birds in season. The black upper surface of the wing can be seen when they make graceful turns in flight. Here is a gull-billed tern next to a black-bellied plover in breeding plumage on the water's edge at Fort Myers Beach. The bird that is rare in this area has the appearance of a tern, but the large, thick black bill, like that of a gull, is unmistakable. The Caspian tern is not generally noticed on Sanibel because it looks so much like the more common royal tern. It eats fish that it dives for and often pirates from other birds. The young birds are fed by their parents for 5 to 7 months after they fledge. The Caspian tern on the right has a much darker red bill than the royal tern on the left. The bird is also larger and heavier in every way: the thickness of the bill, the width of the wing, the size of the body. The roseate tern is a pelagic bird that spends its whole lifetime on the ocean, except when it is nesting in the north, as shown in this picture. They may possibly be seen off the shore in the Gulf, especially after a storm has blown them off course. They are lighter color than the other terns, have a longer, thinner tail, and a longer, thinner black bill. They are said to show a slightly rosy tinge. The common terns breed along the Atlantic coast in summer and winter in South America. A few have been seen on Sanibel, but their similarity to the more common Forster's tern in winter makes it very difficult to identify them. Although they are pelagic birds, they come ashore to feed much more than the Arctic or roseate terns, and they should be observed on the island during migration. The bridal tern is a pelagic bird that spends its whole life over the ocean, except when nesting. They have been located on Sanibel only when a hurricane or major storm has driven them inland. The black tern flies over an inland water's edge or a dry meadow, darting for insects. It is just a bit larger than the least tern and is noticed because of its darker gray color than the other terns. The white-crowned pigeon has rarely been seen on Sanibel. The bird looks like a dark rock dove, but with the obvious white cap. They like to fly around and perch on tall trees. They can be observed on the pine trees on No Name Key, in the Florida Keys, where these pictures were taken. The ringed turtle dove is a popular cage bird that has escaped and formed independent colonies in a number of Florida cities. The birds may infrequently come to Sanibel. These birds are in St. Petersburg, where a large number are prospering, are quite tame, and are fed by local residents. The white-winged dove may rarely appear in the trees on the eastern part of the island in an orchard type of habitat. They eat fruit, grain, and berries, and feed milk to their young. With a contraction of their whole body, the bird issues a soft, cooing call. Who cooks for you? With some variations. They used to be more common on Sanibel than they have been in recent years. The monk parakeet is an introduced South American species that has established colonies in urban areas of Florida and may occasionally be seen on Sanibel. They eat fruit and build large nests on tall trees or other structures, like this water tower in St. Petersburg. The green parakeet has been introduced from Mexico and is rarely seen in South Florida, but it is on the Sanibel checklist. They come in to roost in tall trees at sundown, when the backlighting and low light level makes them difficult to photograph. The canary-winged parakeet is another South American species that is found in suburban areas around Miami and has been recorded on Sanibel. The yellow-billed cuckoo is a migratory bird that is sometimes found on Sanibel in spring and fall. They stay near the top of the canopy in the tallest trees along the Sanibel River in the Bailey Tract and may perch on all parts of the island. They eat insects, especially caterpillars, frogs, lizards, berries, and fruit, and occasionally birds' eggs. Their young have a very short development time, with only 9 to 11 days to hatching, 1 week to walking around the tree, and 2 more weeks to fledge. The yellow-billed has a black upper mandible and yellow lower mandible, like the mangrove cuckoo, but their feathers are white below. The mangrove cuckoo is the rare bird on Sanibel that everyone wants to see. It is a year-round resident that may nest in the area. In the springtime, you can sometimes hear its raucous call from back in the mangroves. Like the yellow-billed cuckoo, it likes to be near the top of the canopy of tall trees, but they must be adjacent to mangroves. Mangrove cuckoos have the same black upper and yellow lower mandible, and look like the yellow-billed cuckoo, but they are yellow-colored below, with a black mask. They are a very rare treat. Smooth-billed anis are rare birds that commonly nest on Sanibel. They are year-round residents on the island in the southeast pond of the Bailey Tract, often called the Ani Pond. The Anis live in groups, and all members share in nest building, rearing young, and defense of their territory. The breeding pairs in the group lay eggs in a communal nest. They eat lizards, insects, small vertebrates, and snails, and some fruit. Sometimes they are hard to find. At other times, they will be all around the paths in the low brush, and you can walk right up to them. The eastern screech owl is the most common owl on Sanibel. They spend the daytime asleep in a nest hole or a hollow limb, like this well-camouflaged bird. They are nocturnal, and their quavering trill is most commonly heard at night while they are hunting for large insects, small mammals, or small birds. They wake up and peer out when disturbed in the daytime. The great horned owl is the largest and strongest of the owls that can occasionally be heard and seen on Sanibel. They perch on a large tree in the evening, searching for prey, and eat animals as large as domestic cats, possums, and great blue herons. They can be distinguished from the barred owl by the large ear tufts. The barred owl has been occasionally found on Sanibel late in the day, standing in the branches of a dense tree near the trunk. It hunts small mammals, frogs, crayfish, and birds, notably screech owls. In spite of the loud call of the nearby Carolina wren, you can hear the 9-note hoot of this parent and young bird. They like the dark woods and can regularly be seen at Corkscrew Swamp, where these pictures were taken. The short-eared owl rarely appears on Sanibel. It is possible in the winter when it perches during the daytime on low trees near open marshes or fields. It hunts for small rodents at dawn and dusk, and may take a few small birds. The ruby-throated hummingbird is the only hummingbird seen on Sanibel. The throat of the male is black unless the light is reflected and just the right way to show the iridescent red. They may be attracted by planting the shrubs that they feed upon that usually have red flowers, or by putting out sugar nectar feeders. The female shown here has a white throat. The red-headed woodpecker is a year-round resident that nests in northern Florida, and they have occasionally wandered to Sanibel. Their red head and the white on their wings that shows up very clearly when they fly separate the red head from the common red belly. As with all of the woodpeckers, they brace themselves with their tails against the tree. The yellow-bellied sapsucker is only a winter visitor to Sanibel. It scales bark from the trees to find insects. It is usually found in the center of the tree near the trunk. It can also be heard as it drills holes in the bark of trees and returns repeatedly to obtain sap from the trees and to eat the insects attracted to the sap. It must guard the sap wells from other animals, including hummingbirds. It also eats berries and fruit. The downy woodpecker can occasionally be seen, and its high-pitched descending rattle heard in high trees on Sanibel. You can generally see white on the back as the bird scales bark to find insects. It may also be attracted to suet feeders. It is the smallest of the Florida woodpeckers. The eastern wood pewee is a rare bird on Sanibel. It is easily identified by its slow, plaintive pee-wee call. They prefer a dark woodland habitat, such as Osceola Forest, where these pictures were taken. The Acadian flycatcher is a migrant that nests in northern Florida and further north. They prefer dense woodland near to water and feed only on insects. The female leaves the nestlings for the male to feed and starts a second clutch of eggs in a new nest. The eastern phoebe is with us in the wintertime on low shrubs and trees around the water. It perches on a branch with its tail twitching slowly as it watches for dancing gnats or other insects. The phoebe is a common cowbird host. It sometimes builds a floor over the cowbird egg, but its numbers are dwindling. The young bird has some yellow underneath. The vermilion flycatcher is a striking bird that is remembered by some residents on Sanibel, but has not returned recently. A pair have spent the winter in Sun City, south of Tampa, in recent years. This is the female bird. Vermilion flycatchers are much more common in Texas and in the southwestern states, where these pictures were taken. The eastern kingbird is easily identified by the white stripe across the end of the tail. It is fearless and often harasses larger birds. It is a migrant that flits across the marsh, hawking insects. It also eats some fruit. The immature bird has much brown on its back. The mature bird has a slate gray back with a white terminal stripe. Most of the scissor-tailed flycatchers that breed in the south-central United States winter in Mexico or Central America, but some winter in South Florida or on the Keys, and a few have come to Sanibel. The birds perch on power lines and hawk insects in short flights from the wires. The long tail helps them maneuver quickly to catch their prey. They frequently stand on the wires in the shade of the power pole. The birds have returned each winter on the mainland along Gladiolus Drive near the site of the new hospital. I hope the construction and continuing development will not drive them away, but they do like open space. Purple martins are the largest of the swallows, and the only one where the male and female have different plumage. The male is glossy purplish blue, while the female is light underneath. The birds migrate to South America in late winter and stay until midsummer. They nest in colonies near to the water. Many nest houses have been put out to attract martins to control insects. Their numbers have declined drastically on the island, possibly because spraying has killed the insects that they feed upon. They are a beautiful and very interesting bird. The bank swallow is an unusual migrant that may pass through Sanibel in flocks during their migration to and from South America. The distinct brownish-gray band across the top of the breast distinguishes it from the other swallows. As you can see, the bank swallow on the left is somewhat smaller than the tree swallow on the right. The barn swallow is a migrant that spends a longer than usual time on Sanibel, particularly in the spring, but nest north of Florida. Their nesting range is increasing in the southeast and may expand to include Florida. It has a deeply forked tail that extends well beyond the wings when perching. The glossy black back and beautiful colors of the breast are striking up close. The blue jay is resident in the area, but they are not common on Sanibel. They are loud and bold and are easy to spot if they are near. Although blue jays generally feed on seeds, nuts, and small invertebrates, they occasionally eat eggs and young birds. They are commonly found in woods and brush, but have become tolerant of humans and are attracted to feeders. Most crows on Sanibel are fish crows, but American crows are sometimes seen. They are considerably larger, and their call is a caw with a definite C. I'm not sure who is afraid of whom in this picture of the crows with some food and the spotted sandpiper. The eastern bluebird is a year-round resident in Florida, but they are more common further north in the state than they are on Sanibel. They have strong competition for nesting sites from the starlings and sparrows. They usually perch on wires or a branch, searching for insects or other foods on the ground below. The veery, and indeed all of the thrushes, are migrants that pass through the area in spring on the way to breeding grounds in the northern states or in Canada, and in the fall on their trip south. The veery has a redder back than the other thrushes and is generally found on the ground. The gray-cheeked thrush is seen along woodland edges and on the ground or low branches, as are all of the thrushes. It has gray cheeks and flanks and an indistinct eye ring. The Swainson's thrush has a uniform brown back and a buff breast, with heavy dark spots and a bold, buffy eye ring. They may be found further above the ground than the other thrushes. The hermit thrush has a rust-colored tail and a whitish eye ring, and may stay in our area all winter. The variety that we have in Florida has buff brown colored flanks. They eat insects and some fruit, especially in winter, as do most of the thrushes. When winters are warm, the robin does not come as far south as Sanibel, and very few of the birds are here. Colder winters bring us flocks of hundreds of robins. They are not as colorful in Florida in the winter as they are during breeding season up north. They find worms in the lawn by sight rather than hearing. The gray catbird never gets very far from heavy undergrowth or brush that it retreats to if approached. It has a call that is the cat's meow. It is usually seen as a single bird that flicks its tail with each call. This winter resident in South Florida also appropriates the call of other birds. The brown thrasher is found in low brush and along hedgerows. It can be seen in the Bailey tract of the refuge and on many other parts of the island, flying across the paths ahead of you as you walk. It has a long series of calls, as the mockingbird does, but it repeats each call only 2 or 3 times. It has been determined that it has over 1,100 different calls in its repertoire, more than any other bird. Some of the brown thrashers are year-round residents in this area, but others migrate north to raise their young. The cedar waxwings perch in flocks on the island in the wintertime. Some years they are very common, and in other years they are seldom seen. The cedar waxwings eat fruit and some insects. They have a reputation for gluttony when fruit is ripe. Their upright stance and crest make them easy to identify. The loggerhead shrikes are seldom noticed and are frequently misidentified as mockingbirds. They are called butcher birds because they kill insects and impale them on thorns or barbed wire. They also kill small birds such as this ruby-crowned kinglet and wedge them into a fork of a tree limb as a stored food supply. They nest in the area in low trees and raise 2 or 3 nests of 4 to 6 eggs each. The parents find insects and caterpillars to feed the young chicks. They leave the nest in about 1 week, looking almost like their parents, and perch in the tree where the parents continue to feed them for a few more weeks. The white-eyed vireo is a year-round resident that nests in the area and can be heard in mangroves around the island. They can be identified by their call that begins and ends with a sharp chick. The bird is hard to photograph as it flits around the denser foliage. You may possibly see a solitary vireo on Sanibel in the wintertime. It is very easy to identify with its white spectacles as it feeds on insects and fruits high in the shrubs and trees. A few yellow-throated vireos winter over in South Florida and may possibly be heard in the taller trees on Sanibel. They have a very rough and raspy call. The red-eyed vireo is a migrant that may be found singing in the trees along the Sanibel River. It is declining, probably because of cowbird predation. The black-whiskered vireo is another bird that is easy to hear, but hard to locate. It nests in a narrow strip along the coast of Florida. Its loud call can be heard in the SCCF Nature Center, Bailey Tract, Ding Darling, and many other spots on Sanibel. They seem to be able to throw their voice as you search for the source of the loud call. The black whiskers on the face seal the identification. Many species of warblers migrate through Florida in spring and fall. They tend to be concentrated where the land extends out into the Gulf of Mexico as they fly to the first landfall on the way north and leave from the farthest land projection as they approach the water on the way south. Sanibel, Fort DeSoto in Tampa Bay, Cedar Key, and the Dry Tortugas off of Key West project into the Gulf on the west coast of Florida and are known for their migrating birds. When the weather is bad, with storms and adverse winds, the birds may be observed in a fallout, where many migrants are concentrated on the first land they reach. In clear weather with fair winds, the birds may overfly the coast and land and feed in the interior so that there are fewer on the coast. It takes a while to learn to identify warblers. You only get a brief glimpse of them as they flit around in the trees. The colors of the warblers are generally much brighter in the spring, when the birds are in their breeding plumage, than in the fall. We will show many warblers and comment on where they may be found and in what habitat. The Tennessee warbler may appear during migration in open woodland and brushy areas near water. They eat insects, but may also have a few berries and nectar. The orange-crowned warbler is a migrant and one of the plainest warblers. The orange crown can seldom be observed in the field. It may feed in sapsucker wells and on low branches, and will be attracted to an orange at a feeder. The Nashville warbler wags its tail as it feeds in second-growth woods, looking for insects. The northern parula is a small warbler that is an agile and active forager that hovers at the branch tips and may cling to the leaflets upside down like the chickadee. It has a short, buzzing song and may be resident all winter. The yellow warbler is a bright springtime migrant that can be found near to the water on low shrubs, bobbing its tail and looking for insects under the leaves. The male has red streaks that are not obvious on the female. It is a frequent cowbird host that is declining. The magnolia warbler can be seen hopping between branches with its tail feathers fanned, picking insects from the bottom surface of the leaves. It is not shy, and you may approach quite close to it. The Cape May warbler is a sluggish but persistent forager of insects, usually in deciduous woods. It also feeds on nectar, and in other parts of the country is very fond of grapes. Its song is weak and squeaky. The female has much duller plumage than the male. The black-throated blue is one of the most conspicuous of the warblers that pass through the area in spring and fall. It feeds on insects and scales the bark for them or hawks them in the air. The female looks like a different bird with dark above and buff below with a white wing spot. The black-throated green warbler is also a migrant through the island. The male sings one song at its territorial boundaries and another to its mate. It pursues insects with tireless energy on low, brushy foliage. The yellow-throated warbler can be found on all parts of the island, usually in tall trees where it feeds. It methodically forages along the larger branches and trunk, like the brown creeper, searching the bark for insects, particularly spiders. It leaves in late spring for a few months to raise its young as far north as Maryland. The pine warbler is a year-round resident of the area and can be seen high up in the pine trees, particularly in the spring.
The pine warbler?
It builds its nest near the tips of the branches and lines it with Spanish moss. They search for insects by creeping along the limbs and hawking for them in the air. They also eat small seeds. The blackpoll warbler migrates later than most of the warblers in both spring and fall. It makes a 2,500-mile round trip across the West Indies to South America, a long trip for warblers. The male American redstart is orange and black. The female is olive gray and white with yellow patches. They are seen hopping and fluttering about and dancing their way across the ground or foliage, fanning their tails and flashing their wing patches as they search for insects. The prothonotary warblers like to be close to the water at the edge of mangroves or woodland. They have a sweet, sweet call. The ovenbird is easy to identify with its black and white stripes and russet crown, and is generally seen walking around on the ground with its tail cocked. You can sometimes hear its teacher, teacher, teacher call. The northern water thrush can be found on the mud flats along the edges of the Sanibel River in the Bailey Tract or the SCCF Nature Center. It can be distinguished from the Louisiana water thrush because the breast and underbody are a uniform shade with dark markings. The eye stripe is a uniform width and shade, and there are dark markings on the throat. When the two are together, the northern is more aggressive and chases the Louisiana. The Louisiana water thrush is also found in the Bailey Tract and the SCCF. The Louisiana has a white throat and a white breast with dark markings and buffy patches on the flanks. The eye stripe is white and wider behind the eye. Both birds walk rather than hop, and the Louisiana wags its tail constantly, but more slowly than the northern. The Kentucky warbler stays near water as it migrates north of Florida to nest. Although it nests on the ground, it stays high up in tall trees of deep woodland where there is little light to photograph. It is easy to hear, but hard to find. The Connecticut warbler is a ground dweller that walks around under short vegetation. This is a female bird with a browner hood. The male will sometimes fly to a shaded perch where it sits motionless and sings for long periods of time. In spite of its bright red color, the summer tanager is more often heard than seen on Sanibel. It is principally a spring migrant that is found in open woodland. The breast of female birds in the east has orange or red markings, while those in the west are solid yellow or gold. It is usually a solitary bird that feeds on insects, particularly bees and wasps. The rose-breasted grosbeak is a migrant in spring and fall that may perch on any part of the island in low trees and shrubs, or forage on the ground. The striking black and white bird with a bright rose breast is easy to identify. It eats insects, seeds, and fruit, and sometimes buds. The female is similar in size to the male, but very different in color, with brown on yellowish streaks. Both have the heavy grosbeak bill. The fall plumage is much duller than it is in spring. The blue grosbeak is another migrant that is seen twitching and spreading its tail in fall and spring in low brush. The bird eats seeds, insects, snails, grain, and sometimes fruit. It is almost the same color as the smaller indigo bunting, but when it turns around, the wings have chestnut wing bars. The female grosbeak has colors similar to the female indigo bunting, but the grosbeak is much larger and the bill is much heavier. The blue feathers are edged in brown in the fall and are much duller. The indigo bunting is a gorgeous migrant in spring and fall along the dirt roads on the island, particularly Wildlife Drive in the refuge. The female is much more drab, with browns and some yellow. They may look like a flock of sparrows under a casuarina tree, where they are eating seeds, until you notice a few deep blue birds among them. The painted bunting is a shy but very colorful bird that hides in thickets and under hedgerows. They like weed seeds, particularly foxtail, but will come to feeders for millet seed. The female is much duller, with green on top and a yellow breast. They breed in northern Florida in the summer, but return to our area for the winter. They frequently return to these feeders in Corkscrew Swamp. The dick sisal is a small, colorful bird that may possibly forage in open fields during migration. They are a common cowbird host and have been declining. They form flocks in winter. The lark sparrow generally winters in Mexico or Central America, but a few stay along the coast in this area. They are gregarious and form flocks that fly and feed together on grass seeds and insects. The savanna sparrow visits Sanibel in late winter and early spring. They form small groups on open grasslands, sandy walks, and low brush. They feed on insects, grass seed, and snails. The grasshopper sparrow is a small bird that is usually found in short grass areas in the winter. It has been declining in recent years, and the Florida variety is endangered. Song sparrows may be found in brushy areas near water. They will work their way up to the highest branch, repeating their song. The white-throated sparrow is a winter visitor to the island. They are found in woodland and marshy areas and in backyards. They hunch down and keep their neck short compared to the white-crowned sparrow that holds its head high. The white-crowned sparrow is an uncommon visitor that is possible on the island from October through May. It feeds on the ground in brushy areas where it finds seeds, occasional insects, and some fruit. The male bobolink can be identified easily by its dark colors with yellow and white markings during the spring migration. It feeds on insects, seeds, fruit, and some nectar, and gathers in large open flocks, except during the breeding season. In the fall, the colors are much duller, like this female. The eastern meadowlark is a year-round resident that occasionally appears on Sanibel. They are much more common on grassy fields on the mainland and in the Everglades, where you can regularly hear their melodious call. They eat grasshoppers, crickets, other insects, seed, and fruit. The common grackle is less common than the boat-tailed grackle on Sanibel, but there are still many around. The bird has a light yellow eye compared to the brown eye of the boat-tail in this area. Brown-headed cowbirds feed on the mainland around cows and cattle, where they eat insects that the animals stir up. Although we don't have cows on Sanibel, we do have cowbirds. The cowbird is a problem. It has had a remarkable expansion during this century and is a major factor in the decline of many songbird species in the area. The cowbird lays its eggs in other birds' nests, where they hatch earlier than the bird's own eggs. The larger chick destroys the host's young, consuming all of the food. While only 3% of a cowbird's 80 eggs survive to become adults, it destroys hundreds of young birds of the host species. It will take many generations for the host birds to adapt to effectively handle the problem, and we will probably lose many of the affected species. The orchard oriole is a migrant that nests in the eastern United States and passes through our area in spring and fall. The boundary of their nesting area is moving south, and they now nest as close as Orlando. The female bird is yellow, and the immature male is yellow with a black bib. The northern oriole is a migrant that perches in the tops of trees on the interior of the island. It eats insects, fruit, and nectar. It is sometimes enticed by bird feeders to stay in the United States in winter. The purple finch has been seen on Sanibel in the past, but not recently. Competition with the expanding house finch population in the north and with the house sparrow has been suggested as the cause of their general decline in the east. This is a female purple finch. The American goldfinch may occasionally come as far south as Sanibel in the coldest part of the winter. Thistle seed is their favorite food. The bird is a common cowbird host and is declining.